Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I know that some of you will be arguably a bit disappointed that, that you may have wanted to go to a session with Isabel dos Santos. I would have enjoyed quoting infant mortality figures to her in Angola and the trends in recent times that are lacking dramatically for a country that spends $200 per capita on health expenditure, where infant mortality looks as dreadful as it is, where a country like Ethiopia has made far more progress with $20 per capita spending in health. But unfortunately, I can't make the comments, and so they will never be recorded. But it doesn't mean that if, for those people who were a bit disappointed on that, that we don't have an incredibly good alternative to actually be able to have a conversation on something that's really important, which is about how Africa works with each other, how Africa can be united on the international stage, and whether it's doing it. And I think the request really is of this session is to actually be, speak your mind and be open, be debate, talk, and let's get some ideas. We can all be very positive and optimistic about what's happening in Africa in general, but there are lots of challenging questions that we have to ask ourselves and to do this. So I have here Ishmael Dodoo here, who is a graduate from Oxford, but who is a kind of a really important person in thinking about issues to do with leadership and management capacities in Africa. Besides many of the things he's been working at within the UN system, currently is Regional Strategic Oversight Advisor to the Office of the Assistant Secretary General, Regional Director for the UNDP Africa. That's a mouthful, but these are, if you think of UNDP, these are the organization that needs to try to facilitate and make things work better in terms of organizationally. And as you know, an Oxford person is now going to head it soon, so it will be brilliant and as efficiently organized as Oxford soon. The other side of it, and because your background is so diverse and so many different things, I'm actually going to turn over to you and actually just ask yourself, what do they need to know to understand what you want to do in this session? And that's my first question to you, and I'll give you the floor to actually introduce the session further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and it's a great honor to be here and to see such an incredible, talented young people. This morning really gave me such an inspiration that Africa actually will arrive home. It's something that I believe that all of us share. For someone, when they give such an elaborate introduction of you, it tends to mask your journey and to highlight some of the things that are important. I started off from a place in Accra, which is full of a lot of armed robbers, a lot of people that are living in depravity. I walked to school barefooted. I was taught in my local language, and at age 7, I taught myself how to read and write English. And I had to constantly struggle with people that are who are doing quite well, and so they are in private school, and they are my friends. I play football with them. So I really have to strive to become like them, and in doing so, I push myself very hard. One of the things that is very useful in that community is that you have, in the midst of all the chaos and all the things, it's the same community where you have one of the best doctors, the lawyers, and so on. So it's a mixed community, and it was you, as a young individual, to decide where you want to go. And I chose the academic because I thought that I've been blessed with that. So just to give you the background that my story is not new. It's something that all of you share. And most of you are very passionate about doing something. The reason you are here and you made it thus far is because you, as an individual, want to make a difference. You want to leave a legacy. You want to make an impact on your generation. And this is something that we share together. So in this talk, I'm really going to drop my diplomatic hat, and I would like to come home and have a conversation as though we are sitting under the baobab tree and talking about issues that concerns the family. So I'd like you to please be less Oxonian don't be too serious, because most of you are too serious. Give me a smile, at least. It's very intimidating. Feel at home, and let's have a conversation. Let's ask the right questions, and let's try to break through some of those questions. And I'm really going to reflect things that, having the benefit of sitting with heads of state, knowing some former heads of state who have served the African continent, know a range of people in politics, in government, in private sector, and having the opportunity to be mentored by very serious people that some of you may know. I really believe that I have a lot inside me to share. And I can connect with you because we connected intergenerationally. And I may have walked the way you have walked, and so we can really have a very honest conversation. And I may not have all the answers, but we will learn from each other. But my vision is that by the time we leave here, most of us will be inspired to take the continent on our shoulders and say, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a dramatic change. I want to see some revolutionary movement here. Whoever agrees with me, please. All right. Okay. So.
Would you like to collect questions already from the floor, or do you want to do more of no, you're going to do your introductory comments now.
Right.
I think you would better move straight on to that and
okay.
get your introductory comments.
Right, so thinking about this question of disunited Africa on the international stage, my question, I wanted to beg the question, the title of this discussion, to say, has Africa been striving for unity at all? And, and I want to give you some ideas about what Africa has been doing to try to get this unity and integration. It's a bit of history, but I think it's important for us to start from that point. Then we can ask ourselves what actually has gone wrong. Because after 50-something years, we're still talking about unity. And why this question now, when there are a lot of things happening? So a bit of milestones. At the time of independence, there was a failed, the countries realized there's a failed attempt to industrialize efficiently from the time of independence. So regional integration became one of the things that they want to run with. And so African countries at the time of independence, I'm talking in 1950s, 60s, embraced regional integration as an important component of development strategies. And I just want to underline that then they see regional integration and unity as an important component of developing these strategies. So the way they had to do that was to look at, to reflect what are the legacies of colonialism that lent themselves to regional integration, and how can we build on those? So some of the legacies were, where they had African financial community among the Francophones in the West and the Central, we call them the CEFA. Then there was an economic union of Central Africa that was existing, and there was a Southern African Customs Union, and then there was something relating to the East African community, sort of. In 1958, then, in responding to the need for Africans to really develop, the UN decided to establish what is called the Economic Commission for Africa in 1958. An idea was to work with the member states to strive towards sustainable development. So this is how we started. In 1963, therefore, when the Organization of African Unity was formed, the integration agenda was still on the table. But one of the things we need to understand is that when the OAU was formed, there were some countries that were still, needed to be liberated. So there were also those who were still under colonization. So you have, on one hand, let's try and achieve this sustainable development. But on the other hand, you also have a school of thought that said, look, what about those who are still struggling? So there was an attempt to help in doing that. So parallel to that was a response for a deeper cooperation of member states to prosecute these two agendas. So they were doing that, if you like, in parallel. Then, in 1963, it became very important that in order for the regional integration to happen and to expand sustainable development, we need to create the financial stream. So the African Development Bank was created. right? So Referendum was created to sort of fast track that component. And they created a fund which is called the African Development Fund that would be looking at securing public and private capital for projects. Then the Nigeria Trust Fund was formed in 1976 as a component of the African Development Bank. But one of the things that happened, so we're talking 1950s, 30 years on in 1980, there was an important meeting that happened in Lagos. And I guess it was at the point where Africa was struggling with the structural adjustment program issues. Africa was struggling with commodity price hikes and so on and so forth. So it was a very tough moment, and an agenda was mainly to look at how to strengthen what we call the economic commissions for Africa. So then you have SADC coming out of that action in 1980, we have SADC being established in 1992, COMESA in 1993, to look at southern and eastern trade areas. Then you have ECAS, ECCAS in Central Africa. Then followed 12 years on, the same head of state met again and said, okay, well, let's look at the actions we agreed in Lagos. Now we are in Abuja, so let's have Abuja plan of action. So then they have the Abuja treaty, which set a 34-year framework for integration. So in the mind of the African Union, integration should happen in 2028. So if we say, well, you know, we are not united, they say, well, 2028 is not yet in, so how can you tell us that we are disunited? And they lays the foundation for the future. Then in 1999, you have the establishment of the African Union in conformity with the OAU Charter. In fact, you will see that there was a change from OAU to African Union in 1999 in Libya. And then in 2000 in Lomé, there was an act to strengthen the African Union establishment. Then in 2002 in South Africa, there was an inaugural launch of African Union. So note, African Union came into effect in 1999. 3 years on, there was an inaugural ceremony with wine and whiskey and champagne in South Africa. And then following that, you have the establishment of NEPAD, which is New Partnership Framework for African Development. And then in 2008, we had the Continental Free Trade Agreement, protocols, you know, that were set out. So, have we been uniting? So far, it's been a series of events that is making an attempt to unite Africa. And rightly so, that turn of events is very consistent with the way the leaders were looking at African unity, regional integration, and the whole idea of strategic, sustainable development of the continent. So it should just tell you that when you look at the African Charter, they say, we the head of state. Because of course it's the head of state that we're meeting and having champagne all the time. Of course the head of state that is talking about let's unite and do things. What about the African people themselves? What were the voices that were coming? All through history, all through what I've shared, an attempt to harvest the talent, the wealth, the nobility, the strength of the African to be able to bring about this dream was missing. Why? Because we, the people, were not involved. And I think the reason we are still asking that Africans should be united is because, one, we believe that it's extremely important to do so. If you look at West Africa, for example, I say you have about, if you put the population together, it's between 380 million or so. Now, if you're manufacturing, you're a soap manufacturer, that everybody likes your soap, you want to use it at home, and you are selling it for 1p, and everybody using it, say they spend 1p per month, you're talking 1p times 380 million pounds. Now, how much is that telling you? So you'll see that in terms of market economy, is very huge. In terms of pulling together, if we look at what we saw this morning, if every one of them represent a country, and these are like-minded individuals, and this is the innovators, these are the ideas that you really want to see in the Africa continent. You can imagine what we'll be able to achieve in terms of transforming the continent with this innovation. So the unity, as we talked about, is missing because we do not involve the people. And I really believe that we can spend this afternoon to look at how then do we involve the people. I have some very drastic strategies that I can share, and I believe that you also have some passionate ideas to share. And so I just thought, let me set the stage for us to know where we have come from so we can be able to charter the way forward. Thanks.
Great. So, we immediately see hands going up, so that's exactly what we want to do. Oh, lots of hands going up. So, well, why don't we start? Please introduce yourself briefly and keep it concise so we have a lot of voices that we can hear today.
Right. My name is Professor of Environment and Development at the University of Reading and a senior fellow here at Oxford this year. I want to go back to your Baobab tree setting. Okay, be honest with us. Come on. What is the role, as you see it, of multilateral institutions like the UNDP and the World Bank in either facilitating or impeding African unity? And this point about we the people with the UN, I think should not be overstressed, because within the UN there is still a huge democratic deficit, as I'm sure you know. But the question, I think, is clear.
Okay, why don't you have some more? You can debate with each other as well.
Hi, I'm Kwame Biko. I'm from General Electric in Ghana. And my question really is, just going back to the example you said about selling a product to 300 million plus. And I just wanted to talk about intra-Africa trade, which we all know is very low, I believe in the 10% region. And the barriers to trade across, for example, a bloc like ECOWAS. And, we just look at, for example, even traveling around the region, the issues of traveling by road, the issues at the border, and even traveling by air. I mean, a flight from Accra to Lagos is about $400. So the question is, how can we actually get people to travel across borders and do business cross borders, and even tourism, boost tourism in other countries, when there are other barriers which are also financial barriers? Okay.
Okay, so I take one more. Just behind you, pass on the microphone, and then we can...
So thank you so much. So I wanted to speak to the Francophone and Anglophone divide on the continent, and the fact that those two regions just remain very much relating with each other as opposed to going across. And I think part of the issue is about the air traffic. For me to go from Kampala to Niamey in Niger, there's just a couple of countries separating us, but I had to go to Charles de Gaulle, get out of the continent to go back to, so that's a little bit challenging. And for the new generation, what can we do to foster a better continental relationship that bridges the Anglophone-Francophone gap?
Right, and I don't think you said your name.
Sorry. I'm Harriet, and I'm doing the MBA here.
Okay, so we have some challenging questions. It's a bit like, what's the point of the UNDP and all these multilateral organizations? Why can't we move around? I mean, I can see the point, maybe the economics of airlines is another matter, but we just can't even cross easily the borders and move around. What is all this? What's the point of all these things?
I have to borrow your mic. So I'm going to be very, very blunt here. What is the point of multilateralism? Multilateralism has a very important role to play in terms of looking at regional common goods, where you are looking at issues that are very important to a range of countries. What the UN does with this is to strengthen the work of the Economic Commission of Africa to engage with member states. We also have the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on AU, African Union, that are engaging with member states to be able to address a lot of these bottlenecks that relates to regional integration, African growth and development. Quite frankly, one of the biggest problem or setback with the way, with the effectiveness of multilateralism. And by the way, before I go back to the biggest hurdles, multilateralism has a lot of things to play in terms of mobilization of even finance that you do not need to pay back in terms of grants. For many countries where UNDP or the UNDP, the programs of support to each country is between 250 million to anything 1.2 billion, right? And these are monies that are supposed to help countries to inculcates the capacity needed to think critically, to strategize, and to be able to develop programs and implement them. The biggest problem we have seen in that sphere of absorbing development aid is that for $100 that is given to a country, they spend less than $25 or $30. So the absorption capacity is very poor. Recently, we're having a conversation with the African Development Bank, and they're very, very frustrated that there's sheer amount of money, but the government member countries are not able to access. Why? Because they don't have the capacity to sort of develop programs, write pipelines, and really get them. It's not there. And then it begs the question, what are we all doing here? But I'll come back to that point. So multilateralism has a lot of support. The biggest hurdle is, if you look at, I'm taking a scan on a continent from the west to central, east, and southern, crises everywhere. Most part of West Africa, of 18 countries, probably 98% of them are fragile. Then you have juxtaposing the crisis, which is political crisis, violent extremism. You're juxtaposing the crisis with environmental problems as well. That is sort of aggravating the situation. If you look at South Sudan, for example, there was no reason why South Sudan should be where it is. At a time of, in this sphere of war, they were producing $47 million per month oil revenue. Now, and they have been fighting. What do the money use for? The monies are used, the budget is necessarily for fighting. Right? Now you have, so the conflict situation, peace and security then absorb all the resources and the time, the talent, and everything that the multilateralism has to offer for Africa. And it feels like we are getting back to the 1970s and 80s, where increasingly it's becoming fashionable for people who are in power to say that they actually want to change the constitution so they can stay on and on and on. So there's an emergence of that. So what we need to get away from is thinking, one, stopping the fighting, making sure that we can prevent crises, and work with government to start thinking more on development. And the other thing that is becoming very important and actually facing the crisis situation is the youth demographic dividends and what do we do with them. And that is a question that is confronting a lot of heads of state. Even when you are fighting, the question is posed to you and you begin to think about it. So we are seeing a shift that is happening. The other thing that is also worrying some heads of states who are, they're getting headache about is what is happening in the geopolitical shifting, and seeing increasingly out of nowhere, somebody like Macron could be president. So some of the head of state are worried that we can have a lot of people coming and be able to challenge the status quo, which is a very good thing. And I think it's a pressure we need to maintain. And I'd like to come back on that. So these are the issues, the challenges that multilateralism is facing. Now, the issue of intra-African trade, free movement, I think this is very, very critical. It is actually something that everyone agrees to, but none of them want to do much about. It's very difficult, you know it, if you're a businessman, to travel from one barrier to the other and to prosecute trade. But we have all the policies. We have all the strategies, I can tell you. There is everything, there's all these ideas about, if you look at the 2063 agenda, it spells very clearly the vision for infrastructure, the vision for education, the vision for... So the problem is willingness to be able to do it. And it's the biggest factor. And that willingness relates to another point, which is leadership. And we saw an example with 3 countries led by, so we have Kagame, Uganda, and Kenya, when they call themselves the coalition of the willing, to be able to say, look, we're going to develop this railway infrastructure that will link these 3 countries. Just to show an example that, look, if there is the willingness, you could do that. And that was Kagame's leadership. If we see a lot more of this, we'll be able to break down some of the barriers that we are seeing. Flight, yeah. I was telling one of my friends, Chooks, actually, that when I was in Liberia, in order to, if I have a meeting in Sierra Leone, which is almost next door, if I don't want to miss my appointment, I have to fly to Brussels so I can get to Sierra Leone on time. No, this is true. I'm not kidding. So the question is why? And today, if you look at West Africa or look at the continent, very small number of countries have even airlines. We have sold all our airline trade routes. We are not developing any more capacities for airline. I've went to some other countries and I saw a lot of Ghanaian pilots who are actually working there. So there's so much potential that the continent has, and everybody knows the problems. Everybody has some ideas about the solution. The problem is, how do you really get things done? And it comes back to the same idea of, can we get progressive leaders? Can we mobilize to try to change the status quo? And what should be that strategy? Because everyone here is convinced that the potential on the continent is huge.
So I'm going to get it back to the floor. So I can't help just to make one comment, because, you know, a lot of multilateralism is taken up by actually, you know, process, by trying to get things, but reducing it very quickly into its all technocratic processes. You know, as long as we have a meeting, there's progress. As long as we have another vision and a strategy, you know, there's like, you know, it must be that one major cause of deforestation in Africa is all printing all these strategies and these visions. You know, you can't travel to a country, you get another vision 2022, 24, 25, whatever the date is. It is implementation, but implementation is often reduced to technocratic things. So my challenge would be is that in the end it's all politics. It's a political challenge that actually, you said it's leadership, it's also political will to do it. You know, Anglophone versus Francophone, by being quite differently aligned both geopolitically and regional politically in terms of how they do it. So my challenge is a little bit, we're always talking about Pan-Africanism. If we can't get it even between a couple of countries to work, you know, why always going for the Pan-African kind of language and everything together? So I don't know. But it is indeed interesting what's been happening in East Africa, where a couple of countries are talking more to each other and actually arguably making maybe a more progress. So should we actually reduce the ambition and just get a couple of countries here and there to work together and do a bit more?
I have one point to mention. You nailed you put the nail right on the head. One of the things that we need to understand, brothers and sisters, look, the way Anglophone thinks are quite different from the way Francophones think, and I see that when we have meetings. No, let's be very honest. It's true, and because of our inability to really understand, you know, our notional point of view, our, you know, socio-cultural upbringing, and be able to, even among ourselves as Africans, be able to understand the point of view of the Francophone and why they will approach something differently from why Anglophones were. It's causing a lot of problems. Even so, in the UN, for example, it's very difficult to have all Africans in African Bureau working to achieve something. You really need to include different parties to break down that. So there's something about us redefining ourselves and knowing that, look, we have different cultural differences, but we can do things together by simply trying to understand each other and having the Afrocentrism right in our heart. The other point I want to also say, with the bureaucracy and so on, and indeed, there's a lot of things, and I thought you were going to mention wine, because I invited someone to the UN and I gave the person a tour, and the person said, "Oh, is that all you do? All you do is just drinking wine and whiskey, and you claim you are working." Because he saw that people are sitting down drinking wine, negotiating. But, you know, wine is an important part of negotiation. But politics, everything starts and begins with relationships and politics. And it's extremely important for us to be politically savvy, very astute individuals, even in our careers, to begin to understand how to navigate the politics and the obstacles of politics. Because once you understand that, you'll be able to influence something in a very much big way.
Okay, let the room speak again. We have some questions there, because yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Velani Mboweni. I'm a Johannesburg-based entrepreneur, and I also serve on the African Youth Commission. I wanted to ask you a question, that what we're saying here is all very well and good, but what does it mean to the average African on the side of the road or in the village? Because we can all discuss this at an intellectual capacity, we're at Oxford, but what does it mean for the ordinary person on the street to buy into this idea of uniting a disunited Africa on an international
So what's your own answer?
I think we'd have to solve the issue of the fact that as young people, we have more faith in private companies than we do in states, because private companies make things tangible. So you can touch a button, get a car outside, you can dial a USSD code, make a payment, you post a picture on Instagram, you become famous. Those platforms make things tangible for us. So instead of us talking and saying, well, multilateralism, Vision 2063, how can a young individual connect with something tangible to buy into the idea? Because that's all it takes. So I want to know from you.
Well, but
I didn't ask myself.
Okay, we'll get further, but my only thing was I would love the situation where the average person next to the road can buy a car in Africa. But let's continue. The back, yeah.
Hi, my name is Mokhtar, and I'm from Mali. So how can we speak of unity from the top when at the bottom, like in South Africa, you have xenophobia, where the ground cannot really travel, where from the custom trip, from the ground travel from Bamako to Senegal, you pay a lot more money. That almost will cost you more than actually flying. So how unity means in that sense?
Excellent. Okay, let's move that microphone around.
Thank you. My name is John Mark Bwanika. I'm from Uganda. So I'm struggling to understand what a united Africa would look like. And so if you could help me paint that picture, like what shall we see when we say we are united? So if my flight from Uganda to Kenya goes down to $50, shall we say that we are united? If we start using the train, or if we start having the same policies in Nigeria as we have in Uganda, shall we say that we are united? It's not very clear to me what a united Africa.
Okay, very good. A few more. Where are we? Oh, wherever the hand is. Yes. Let's move forward, and then we'll come to the other corner there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm also a student over at Said Business School, and I'm curious, there was a Pan-African passport that was unveiled at the World Economic Forum in Kigali last year, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on the role of a Pan-African identity, or some kind of unifying document like that that facilitates the movement of people. What kind of a role would this play in your sort of vision of this global policy and a united front?
Okay, one more. Let's go to that far corner. They've been patiently waiting, and then we'll move forward. Yeah.
Hi. So my question is more about us looking at the framework we work in. If we start with the premise that multilateralism isn't really built for Africans, what can we do, or is it feasible for Africans to retreat from that relationship, understanding that the model or the framework isn't built for us?
Good. And then the final one in the corner there, you want as well? No, it's fine. So there's a final one for now, and then we'll do a round in the front in the morning.
Thank you. My name is Abner, Oxford student. So I'd just like to ask that just like Britain decided to leave the European Union using, as we know from Brexit, has there been, and that seems to me an attempt to get the views of the people. We're talking again about multilateralism or multinationalism or Pan-Africanism. Have we attempted to get the views of the people using whichever means is available, just like, you know, was done here? Have we ever considered a referendum to find out what do the people really want? Just like my brother said, are we really ready to be united? Do we really want to be united? And then we can have a discussion as to what that unity even means.
Excellent. Okay. Lots of questions here, making it tangible, what it means on the ground, what it means for the average person. Does it actually make sense in the xenophobic societies that actually unfortunately also exist, these places? And indeed, when is the Zexit, Texit, or whatever it's going to happen? Go for it.
I thought you were going to attempt some of the questions. So what does it mean?
I only wish I was African, so I can't claim it.
What does it mean, this whole African unity integration into the person on the ground? I'll try to answer this question as someone who's very traditional oriented, to reflect what my grandmother told me. I grew up knowing my grandmother being a businesswoman, but also a fetish priestess. And what she does was she has friends who, some of them are Sierra Leoneans, they call them Salon. Then this has also other market women, who are Togolese and so on. And I remember that I remember, helping my grandmother to pluck peppers and gather them, and, she go and sell them. And I remember one time I asked her, but why are you selling this to Sierra Leone? Why don't you, take it to Katamanto Market, which is in Accra? And so I want you to understand one thing, that my market, literally, she said that my territory is enlarged because I am trading with the Togolese and Sierra Leone, right? The sheer volume of what I can reach is higher. And it's not just my grandmother, but my grandmother's friends who were doing similar were the ones who, when you go, we call them the Makala businesswomen. They really built Accra, Ghana in the 1950s to the 70s. Most of the houses that you see, they are the ones that we did it. Now, these, for them, they understand the essence. They don't really see the barriers that we see now. We become very technocratic, that we see barriers, we use capacity, all these legal terms. They don't see those things. What they see is a brother or a sister across the street who is just wanting to do business with me. And I feel that culture, if it had been transferred intergenerationally, would have eased the way we are striving to get united. And it happens at a time that you have more or less individuals like the Kwame Nkrumahs and others who are very much pro-Africanism. So they allow these things to happen. Then you have a new generation of leaders who are very nationalistic and putting all these barriers. So somehow we miss the boat by not having the transference of that heart or passion for Africanism from the time of independence to now. And so we need to really question that. So what does that mean? How then can we achieve unity when, as an African in South Africa, you get these xenophobia issues and so on happening? I think that's a very tough question to ask. Somebody said that an institution is not an institution unless it is full of people who are managing it. Now, it is us who defines what we want to have. If you, for example, and I'll answer this question by painting, what does it mean? How can I paint a glowing picture of the African unity? For me, African unity is the essence of it is seen in what we saw this morning, where everyone is innovating in different areas and contexts of his country, and we are able to bring that talent together to have millions of patents that are coming from Africa that are transforming worlds in other regions. It means going to, say, West Africa, having a state-of-the-art hospital that is manned by every rank and file African, the finest brains of medical practitioners and innovators who are actually addressing the problems of the region. It means having an agriculture that, value chain agriculture, which is harvesting the talents of everyone across different aspects of it who are actually working together. It means having billionaires and billionaires in Africa who are actually Africans themselves, taking advantage of the sheer growth and wealth of the continent. It means having an infrastructure that is going across, and everyone is able to travel on it and do their business, and we define our identity in the context of Afrocentrism. That my friend whose parents are Nigerians, one parent is a Nigerian, the other is a Taiwanese, and looks very much like, anything very much like a Chinese, still feels as an African, has the opportunity to be able to engage with the continent and work as an African. So the definition of the Africanism has to take into consideration the fact that the African seed has also spread all across continents. And the manner in which we're able to bring these wonderful, wonderful talent and ideas and seed from all our continent into a movement that will transform the continent is what African unity means. It is not uniting sovereignties. It's uniting ideas, uniting innovations, uniting talents, uniting strength, and engaging the rest of the world with a strategy that is very African central.
Good. So why don't we have our own referendum here now? Come. So, and let's have a proposition here. It's very simple in the room. You know, we heard voices that question the relative importance as this agenda to do this. You know, so and let me try to. You know, it's very important with referendum questions to get your questions right, as we have discovered. The question would be that I want to ask you. You know, is it worthwhile to keep on spending the energy, the resources, the manpower to actually work towards, you know, Pan-African unity and a strong political unity in Africa, or should we not do this, keeping in mind that there's so many other problems in Africa that maybe we should have other ways of trying to address these first before we go for it? So who would be in favor of the idea of keep on spending even more resources in this kind of ideal of Pan-African kind of a unity thing and a political effort? So who would be in favor here to do this?
Well, I think you're reading that's wrong. Yeah, the framing is wrong. And with your respect.
You have to tell me.
We don't want a Niger Farage.
Well, I was just trying to get some energy here. Okay, propose the referendum question then, please.
If you listen carefully to what Ish has said, it strikes me that the word is not unity or disunity. The word is really interdependence. And unity is a loaded, a moral, a normative, concept. What you have described in terms of infrastructure, trade, movement, is interdependence, not unity. So, Paul, ask, do we want to see a more interdependent Africa? And I think that's the way the referendum question needs to be framed.
Yeah, but then everybody will vote in favor. Come on, how can we have a so you can't have any disagreement. You look for something that at least a break line in the room. So we can first get his question. Do you want more interdependence here in Africa? Yeah, we all want that. But is the route to that to work in the way we're working at the moment, in the kind of the frameworks we're using, the political, focusing on an African Union and the kind of the political and energy that goes to it? Who is thinking we can get to that? Is that a way to go? Oh, we're not going to do that. Okay. So, would anyone want to vote? So, yeah. Let's some more from the floor. We have a last round and we'll keep you speaking now for a while.
I think, hi, I'm Jose, I'm from Angola. I think the idea of unity or interdependent for Africa depends on one thing, trust. Africans need to trust each other. If it's part of any relationship, trust. If we don't trust each other as brothers and sisters, we'll never be united. We'll never do business. We'll never make difference. So that's the start, because if I, from Angola, still choose an agronomist from Israel, which I know that Zambia and South Africa, they have people educated and well, just shows that I don't trust my own people. But until we trust each other, there will not be a united Africa.
Points very well made. Let's get some more there as one, and then we'll go back to the back where there's lots of hands.
Hi, my name is Musa. I'm a student here at Oxford, as well as working in Oxford at the John Radcliffe Hospital. My question really is on you've mentioned about the crisis that there is in Africa, thereby we're not coming together. But if I could give you 3 countries of which you've mentioned about the crisis, South Sudan, and then you've got Nigeria in some parts, and of course, recently in Southern Africa, where Tanzania is claiming some of the boundaries of Malawi, which is a small country. We have to go to the source of the problem. So probably maybe tackling the source of the problem, which is the resources that there are found in these areas, and thereby, after those resources have been found, the conflicts start from there. I think that's what...
Okay, let's take the microphone to the back, and then let's go around starting. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Wilfried. I'm doing a DPhil here in cancer biology. And my question is more out of a kind of thinking process. So I'm wondering, is it a valid question as we're thinking about African unity to ask ourselves whether the Western involvement will be supportive of it?
Oh, we'll be sorted about that. Okay, good. Continue. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Njodi. I'm a law student here. My question is just to move into the international realm. Is it feasible for Africa as a continent, as a bloc, to form unity or collaborations with other continents or blocs such as Asia in order to make an impact on the international stage? And what are the potential challenges that we may face in that respect? And with that said, we do have 5 minutes left in the session.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Medi Segawa. I live in Birmingham and I run a startup, but I'm originally from Uganda. Well, mine is a food for thought for us as young people. I think it's a shame in the 21st century that 14 Francophone countries in Western Africa, they bank their money in France, actually. They use the France as whatever central bank. And actually when they need their money back, they don't get it in full entirety. They don't get up to, I think, 60%. And this is due to colonial contracts. So as Africans, I think it's time to rise up. We could copy the model of Europe. They've got like EU directives. African Union actually should set up African Union directives that central banks' money actually should be banked in Africa and not in France. Thank you.
Okay, good. There, and then we move the microphone back forward.
Thank you very much. I have a question, but I also quickly want to make a comment. I think thinking differently amongst African nations, I don't think this is a challenge for unity, as you put it, because within the EU, they speak different languages. There is no single language that unites the European Union. I mean, maybe French or German, but in the real sense, the 27 or 20 so Schengen countries speak about 27 different languages. So I don't think that's a big deal. Then the idea of borderlands, we know before the artificial boundaries were constructed that historically, I'm a historian by training. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Damilola. I'm from Cambridge. Borderlands, people have always lived in borderlands. And you note it today between Badagry and Benin, between Rwanda, Tanzania. I mean, every part of Africa, you know that people have been moving. And so I think this idea, so would it be fair? Let me quickly ask my question, I'm sorry. Would it be fair to say that the everyday Africans, to echo my brother here, everyday Africans do not really care about these artificial borders, and that the idea of disunity is fueled by African leaders themselves?
Okay, very good. So we need to go quicker. So if people could do very short, quick interventions, we go there, we go forward, because I want to hear as many voices as we can.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Moritz from the University of Edinburgh. I have a question. I was once told this unity goes hand in hand with neo-patrimonialism. So if you want to create unity, you have to abolish neo-patrimonialism in Africa.
Good.
So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that sounds like an essay question to me, but excellent. It was a good question. I'm not trying to say, but it's, yeah, discuss.
Hello. My name is Chika. Used to be a student here. So you promised us no diplomacy, that you're going to take off your diplomat hat. So I was wondering, because you didn't actually address a particular issue, and you're kind of actually fostering it. You made mention of Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya trying to work together. So are you telling me that to achieve a united Africa, we also need to support autocracy in our government, just because these people have the same vision? Because we have the Ethiopian president been there for a while. We have Museveni in Uganda been there forever and it's not leaving. Because they have they want to work together, we should leave them there so that we can achieve united Africa. Is that what you're trying to say?
That sounds like a controversial statement, but good point. Well made, João. Good.
Oh, hello, I'm João from Angola. I'm an economics student. And firstly, I would like to make a point. To begin with, in terms of trust, in Patrick Lumumba, the director of the law school in Kenya, says that our government introduced free free education, but it seems that it's free of knowledge. And our government itself doesn't trust on its human capital. As soon as they get sick, if they're colonized by the British, they run to London. So just to add the point that our colleague here made, that we don't trust each other. Second point is that we talk about free movement of goods and people, but at the same time, we see that countries, they have unsustainable fiscal policies. And in many conferences, we talk about, oh, we need to redesign our policies, but we can see that we don't try. Even the policies are not sustainable. So we young people, all we want is just transparency from our government. So the question is, are we ready?
Good. You'll have to wrap up now. Answering all these questions in.
Thank God I have to. Thank God I have to wrap up. You raise a lot of interesting questions, and I'm just going to be very, very blunt. We're not talking about dictatorship. I'm talking about the essence of the willingness to do something. So I'm talking about it could be anybody else. It could be anybody who come together to say this is what we want to do. So it's not about the individuals and how long they've stayed in power. It's about the principle of doing it. And I hear you about the point on colonial borders and the AU bloc. We are seeing it in negotiations in the UN that African Union, the group of 77, they block together and work with Asia to influence global policy. So yes, it is allowed. You've all raised very important points, and I just want to, and we can answer all the questions, and I believe that part of this will be for us to continue the conversation. But in ending, what I wanted to really challenge you about is we all want one thing. We want to see our countries doing very well. We want to see a stable government. We want to see progress, prosperity. This is every day when you sleep and you wake up. The reason you are here in Oxford studying, everywhere, and the reason you have ambition is that you want a situation where you can look at your country and look at the continent and feel proud. Now, in order to do that, it requires some sacrifices. Many of us have great ideas, but are never willing to move beyond those ideas and to engage. Politicians I've met, and trust me, I've met a lot of them. And one of the things that they like and they relish, and they say, oh, you diaspora people, we always will make sure that you don't come back because we will create the art of politics as an ignoble venture. So that you look at it and say, so they mention, oh, you're a politician, when you want to say this guy is not trustworthy. But politics and leadership of a country is a very noble cause. And I really want to challenge all of you. Living here, think about it. Between 5 to 10 years, how do you create an ecosystem of support to build intergenerational progressive leaders to be able to go back to their country and take over the reins of power so that we can sit on the continent and be able to take decisions that will transform the continent? And I want to challenge you that the sense of urgency is now, because this is your generation. If you don't engage, when you are 76 or 90 and you go home for retirement, that is when you become a refugee. Because those you left behind, you don't want to engage, the riffraffs will take on the reins of power. You lose everything you have, you carry your sack, and you start singing a song. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so well, give an applause already, and I just want to make some quick closing comments. Look, there's a lot more, and apologies, there's still some people who wanted to have a say and to come into it, but it's great to have that kind of energy. There's some things there, where I can, in terms of wrapping up, you know, there are some big political things, you know, and sometimes you should have no illusion if we're going to get some political unity at the top, you know. There's an awful lot of stuff happening in lots of individual countries, and whether we want to dream of autocracy, of want to condone patrimonial systems, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. It will have to go hand in hand. But I just have like, well, I also want to say, you know, don't imagine that the EU is necessarily this kind of perfect example of how you should be doing it. Not least for the thing is that there needs to be trust as well in that, you know, and it's that, you know, if you ask somehow, you know, definitely in this country people didn't quite trust it. But I come from a very different country than Britain, and I don't understand this place. I come from an ethically divided country that could have had civil war all the time. It's speaking lots of languages. I come from Belgium, but actually, you know, and have said lots of sympathies. But the important thing is there where you then actually, how do you work together? And I think it came out in discussion. Keep it real, don't work in imagined worlds. You know, we're living in this real world, it's a big mess. Africa is in many ways a big mess, but I'm working that real world and doing it. You know, language, I like the emphasis that people said, Francophone via Anglophone, but even from my own experience, and I know Africa in many countries is a big example of that. People speaking different languages. And where are we getting in Francophone Africa learning English, but also in Anglophone Africa learning French? It would be very helpful for some of these kind of patterns that are happening, and actually other ways of building that trust that was referred to. And then finally, you will work together and be united and interconnected in a much better way. From the moment it's also worth for everybody, and as everybody as individuals, to be connected and interconnected, and not just for your leaders only. And so I think that's where I will leave it here. And thank you for a great session, lots of energy, and that's always good.